Welcome to our channel, and today another story, another truth that cannot be ignored.
The police officer's hand rested on the black grip of his holstered pistol, a casual gesture that was anything but. Across the grass, a woman named Carol was performing her victory, her voice a shrill instrument of fear painting him as a monster. And between them stood his stepdaughter, Lily, her small face streaked with tears, the epicenter of a nightmare David Thorne never could have imagined. Just 10 minutes ago, this exact spot of green earth had been a place of triumph. The model rocket Lily had spent weeks building, the one David had patiently helped her sand and paint, had soared into the blue sky in a perfect arc. The memory of her shriek of pure joy was now a ghost, replaced by the chilling sound of police radios crackling in the quiet afternoon. Two squad cars were parked awkwardly on the grass, their presence a violent slash across the peaceful park scene. Everything seemed to shrink under the weight of their flashing lights, the vibrant colors of the playground suddenly looking dull and threatening. David kept his own hands carefully in view, palms open, a universal sign of peace that felt utterly useless. He was trying to project calm, trying to be the solid, reassuring figure Lily needed. But inside, a cold fire of panic was spreading through his veins. Every instinct screamed at him to run to Lily, to scoop her up and shield her from the accusing glares. But he knew any sudden movement would be misinterpreted. He was a large black man. In this situation, in this neighborhood, with a crying white child, he was already guilty. He was a threat, a kidnapper, a monster. The words Carol had shrieked into her phone echoed in the space between heartbeats. He could see the officers weighing them, testing their fit. He could feel their suspicion coiling around him like a physical restraint, tighter and more suffocating than any pair of handcuffs. The lead officer, a man with a square jaw and eyes that gave away nothing, took a slow step forward. His name tag read Miller. He addressed David, but his gaze flickered constantly toward Lily, as if expecting David to make a sudden move for her. "Sir, I need you to take 3 steps back. Keep your hands out of your pockets and where I can see them." His voice was flat, a textbook execution of protocol that felt like a physical blow. David complied instantly, the soft grass sinking under his feet with each deliberate step backward. He felt 100 unseen eyes on him from the surrounding houses, from the other parents who had frozen by the swing sets. The world had become a stage, and he had been cast as the villain without ever seeing a script. "He was luring her, officer." Carol's voice sliced through the air again. She had moved closer to the second officer, a younger man named Riley, positioning herself as a trusted witness. "I saw the whole thing from my window. He was trying to get her to go with him, whispering to her, 'You should check his car.' The poor thing was absolutely terrified." The lie was so audacious, so complete, that for a second David's mind went blank with sheer disbelief. He had been singing a goofy song with Lily not 20 minutes ago, his voice off key, her laughter echoing across the lawn. How could that be twisted into this? He found his voice, forcing it to remain steady, to betray none of the screaming rage that was building in his chest. "Officer, my name is David Thorne. This is my stepdaughter Lily. Her mother's name is Sarah Thorne. We live on Oak Street, 4 blocks from here. We came to launch the model rocket we built." He nodded his head slightly toward the colorful rocket lying on its side near a small tripod, a forgotten prop from a different, happier play. Officer Miller's eyes followed his gesture, lingered for a moment on the rocket, and then snapped back to David's face, completely unmoved. The evidence of their innocent afternoon meant nothing. It was just scenery. "He's telling the truth," Lily's small voice piped up. She took a hesitant step toward David, her hands clenched into tiny fists at her sides. "We were just playing. He's not a monster. He's my stepdad." The last word came out with a slight wobble, a reflection of a family still new, still settling. It was the crack in her voice that the officers seemed to hear the loudest. Miller's expression softened, but not with understanding. It was with pity, the kind reserved for a victim who doesn't yet know the full extent of her own trauma. "It's okay, kiddo," Miller said, his voice gentle in a way that made David's skin crawl. "We're here to help. You're safe now." He was talking to Lily, but looking at David, and the message was clear. You are the danger she needs to be saved from. Carol saw her opening and pounced. See? He's brainwashed her. She's confused. You have to get her away from him before he frightens her even more. For God's sakes, do your jobs. Her voice was a command, the voice of a citizen who paid taxes and expected service, the voice of a woman who had never been questioned in her own backyard. The younger officer, Riley, looked at Miller and gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. The decision had been made. Sir, for everyone's safety, my partner is going to have a chat with your daughter by our vehicle, Miller stated. The word daughter now sounding like a courtesy he didn't believe. You will stay here with me. A roaring sound filled David's ears. The primal, paternal instinct to protect was a physical force, begging him to cross the space between them, to put himself between Lily and the world. He felt his muscles tense, his jaw clenched so hard a bolt of pain shot toward his temple. He had to fight his own body, had to nail his feet to the earth. He knew this was the moment that mattered. This was the test. One raised voice, one aggressive step, one flicker of the rage he was entitled to, and he would become the monster Carol had invented. He squeezed his eyes shut for a second, picturing Sarah's face, and forced a long, slow breath out of his lungs. "No!" Lily cried out as Officer Riley gently took her arm. "David, don't let them take me!" She reached for him, her small hand grasping at the air. Her panic, born of confusion and fear of the police, looked like something else to them. It looked like a victim trying to get back to her captor. It was the final, brutal twist of the knife. As Riley led his weeping stepdaughter toward the squad car, David felt a profound and terrifying powerlessness, a hollowing out of his very soul. He had never felt so alone. Miller now stood directly in front of him, blocking his view of Lily. The officer's face was an impassive mask. "Okay, Mr. Thorne. Let's start over. I need to see some identification. And you can tell me again what you're doing in this park." The question was a formality. The real interrogation was in his eyes. As David slowly reached for his wallet, a single clear thought cut through the fog of his fear. Sarah. He needed Sarah. He needed Lily's mother. He looked Officer Miller directly in the eye, his voice low but firm. "I will cooperate fully. I'll give you my ID. I'll answer every question. But first, I need to make one phone call. I am calling my wife." Officer Miller stared at David for a long moment, his expression unreadable. The request was reasonable, yet in this context, it felt like a negotiation David had no right to propose. Finally, the officer gave a curt nod. "One call. Make it quick. You stay on speaker." He did not offer David his phone back. Instead, he held out his own. David recited Sarah's number from memory, his mind clinging to the 10 digits as a lifeline. A few seconds later, Sarah's voice filled the air, bright and cheerful, a sound from another universe. "Hey, you! Did the eagle finally fly?" she asked, her nickname for their little rocket project. The sound of her unsuspecting happiness was almost enough to make David break. He swallowed hard. "Sarah," he began, and the name was a jagged rock in his throat. "Sarah, listen to me. Something's happened. We're at the park. Someone called the police." The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. Then her voice was different, stripped of all its warmth, replaced by a cold, sharp dread. "David, what happened? Are you okay? Is Lily okay?" "We're okay, but they think, Sarah, they think I'm hurting Lily. They think I'm a kidnapper. You have to get here, now." His voice cracked on the last word, and as Sarah began shouting that she was on her way, the world seemed to dissolve around him, pulling him back to the moment it all began. It was only 2 months ago that they had stood on the very same patch of grass, not as suspect and victim, but as a family. The moving truck had just rumbled away, leaving them in the quiet suburban street with a mountain of boxes and a brand new key. Sarah had wrapped her arms around his waist, her head resting on his chest, while Lily chased a butterfly near the ornate wrought iron archway that read Willow Creek Estates. This was it, the culmination of years of hard work. Sarah's success as a graphic novelist and David's thriving web design business had afforded them this slice of the American dream. A good school district for Lily, a yard for a dog they promised they'd get, and this park, this beautiful, sprawling green space, was the jewel in the crown. Officer Miller stared at David for a long moment, his expression unreadable. The request was reasonable, yet in this context it felt like a negotiation David had no right to propose. Finally, the officer gave a curt nod. "One call. Make it quick. You stay on speaker." He did not offer David his phone back. Instead, he held out his own. David recited Sarah's number from memory, his mind clinging to the 10 digits as a lifeline. A few seconds later, Sarah's voice filled the air, bright and cheerful, a sound from another universe. "Hey you, did the eagle finally fly?" she asked, her nickname for their little rocket project. "No more worrying about cracked city pavement or rusty playgrounds," Sarah had said, her voice filled with a hopeful pride that made David's heart swell. He had looked at Lily, at her blonde hair catching the afternoon sun, a stark and beautiful contrast to his own dark skin, and felt a surge of protectiveness so fierce it almost hurt. He knew this move was a bigger adjustment for her. Her biological father had been out of the picture for years, and David's presence was a new and fragile thing. He was not just a husband to Sarah, he was trying to become a father to Lily. He was an outsider trying to build a home inside a family that existed long before him. Their first official welcome to the neighborhood came 3 days later in the form of Carol Peterson. She had approached them while David was struggling to assemble a new grill in the front yard. Sarah was directing movers with a new sofa, and Lily was drawing on the driveway with chalk. Carol carried a welcome basket that seemed more like a prop than a genuine offering. She was the head of the neighborhood association, she announced, a position she held with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice. Her smile was wide and brilliant, but it never quite reached her cold, appraising eyes. She directed all her warmth at Sarah and Lily. "It is just so wonderful to have some new faces," she said to Sarah. "We're a very tight-knit community here, very safe. We all look out for one another." Then she turned her gaze to David, and the temperature seemed to drop by 10 degrees. "And you must be—" she trailed off, leaving the sentence hanging in the air. David Thorne, Sarah's husband. He extended a hand, greasy from the grill assembly. She eyed it for a second before giving it a brief, limp shake. "Oh," she said, the single word loaded with a universe of surprise. "How lovely. And what is it you do, David?" The question felt less like polite conversation and more like an interrogation. He explained his work, but he could see she wasn't really listening. Her eyes were already cataloging him, filing him away in some internal cabinet. He was an anomaly in her perfect, homogeneous world, an error in the code she was determined to correct. That initial encounter set the tone for the weeks that followed. The microaggressions began to accumulate, like a series of tiny paper cuts. One morning, as David was weeding a flower bed by the front porch, Carol walked by with her dog. "Oh, I didn't realize Sarah hired a new gardening service," she'd called out. "They usually send a truck?" David had just smiled tightly and replied, "Just me today, Carol." Her surprise was genuine, and in its own way, more insulting than any slur. She simply could not compute his existence as a homeowner, as Sarah's husband. In her world, he belonged in a service truck. A week later, he and Lily were in the park, kicking a soccer ball back and forth. Their laughter was the loudest thing in the mostly empty playground. Carol had materialized from a walking path, her face a mask of concern. "I'm afraid I've had a complaint from one of the neighbors about excessive noise," she'd said, looking directly at David. "This area is meant to be a tranquil space for everyone." The complaint was an obvious fiction. The only house close enough to hear them was her own. It was a message, clear and simple. You are too loud. You are a disturbance. You do not belong. It was after that incident that David decided to take control of the narrative, at least within his own family. He wanted to build something with Lily that was undeniably theirs. That was the genesis of the Lily Rocket Project. He bought a complex model rocket kit, something to challenge her sharp scientific mind. "We should document this," he'd suggested one afternoon as they were sanding the balsa wood fins in the garage. "We can make a little movie, a documentary, for you to show your grandkids someday." Lily, who was usually reserved, loved the idea. She appointed herself the director. The small vlogging camera David owned became their constant companion. The footage from those weeks was a portrait of a blossoming relationship. It captured David showing Lily how to mix epoxy, her brow furrowed in concentration. It captured them debating what to name the rocket, settling on the Stardust. It captured their laughter, their shared moments of frustration and triumph. The camera saw David becoming a father. And then it saw Carol. They were in the park, filming a test of the rocket's parachute mechanism. Carol approached, ignoring the camera on its mini tripod, and knelt down to speak to Lily, deliberately excluding David from the conversation. "Everything okay at home, sweetie?" Carol had asked, her voice dripping with a fake syrupy concern. "There are a lot of changes for you right now. I just want you to know that if you ever feel uncomfortable, you can tell a trusted adult, like me." Lily had just stared at her. "I am okay," she'd said, her voice firm. "We're building our rocket. Please leave us alone." David had stepped in then, his voice dangerously quiet. "Carol, I think that's enough. She asked you to leave us alone." Carol had stood up, her face flushing with anger. She looked at David with an expression of pure venom. "I was just making sure the child is safe," she'd said, turning on her heel and marching away. The camera had captured it all. The intrusive questions, Lily's confident dismissal, David's quiet fury, Carol's parting glare. It was a recording of the seed of her malicious narrative being planted. That night, David showed the footage to Sarah. He'd been trying to shield her from the full extent of Carol's behavior, not wanting to taint their new beginning. But this was a line that had been crossed. Sarah watched the clip, her face growing pale with rage. "That's it," she said, her hands clenched. "I'm going over there. I'm going to tell her if she ever speaks to my daughter again, I'll—" "You'll what?" David had asked softly, stopping her. "You'll get into a shouting match with her? Sarah, you don't understand. With people like her, I can't win that fight. If I get angry, I'm the aggressive black man. If you get angry, you're the hysterical wife. All she has to do is stay calm and call us threatening. We have to be smarter. We ignore her. We live our lives. We don't give her any power." It was a speech he had given, in one form or another, his entire life. A survival guide he wished he didn't have to teach his new family. Reluctantly, Sarah had agreed. They would starve Carol of the attention she craved, a decision that now felt like a catastrophic miscalculation. The memory of that conversation evaporated, leaving David standing in the terrifying present, the phone still in his hand. Officer Miller was watching him, his eyes narrowed. "Is she on her way?" "Yes," David said, his voice hoarse. "Good," the officer replied, taking the phone back. "Now, about that ID." The sun beat down on David's neck. He could hear Lily sobbing near the police car. He could feel Carol's triumphant stare burning into his back. The whole world had been reduced to this small, suffocating patch of grass, and he was trapped in the center of a lie so powerful he feared the truth would never be strong enough to tear it down. David was just pulling his driver's license from his wallet when the sound of a car braking hard on the nearby street cut through the tension. A door slammed, and seconds later, Sarah Thorne appeared, moving with a speed and purpose that made everyone turn. She wasn't frantic. She was a missile locked on a target. Her eyes found Lily first, then David, and in a fraction of a second, she assessed the scene, her face hardening into a mask of pure, controlled fury. "Lily," she called out, her voice cutting through the air. She walked past the officers as if they were statues, went directly to her daughter, and knelt, pulling her into a fierce embrace. She held Lily's face in her hands, her thumbs wiping away the tears. "Lily, look at me. Are you hurt?" "No!" Lily sobbed. burying her face in her mother's shoulder. "Did David hurt you? Did he scare you?" Sarah asked, her voice low and urgent. "No, it was the lady and the police. They scared me." Sarah's head snapped up, and she fixed Carol with a stare so intense it seemed to suck the air out of the space between them. "You," she said, her voice dangerously quiet. "What did you do?" Carol, momentarily thrown off by Sarah's sudden arrival, quickly regained her composure. She puffed out her chest, resuming her role as the vigilant protector of the community. "I did what any responsible citizen would do, Sarah. I saw your daughter in distress with a man she seemed afraid of. I intervened. You should be thanking me." "Thanking you?" Sarah's laugh was a sharp, ugly sound. "You terrorized my daughter, and you called the police on my husband. The only person in distress here is you, Carol. Distressed that a black man has a key to a house on your precious street. That is an outrageous accusation," Carol sputtered, her face turning a blotchy red. "This has nothing to do with race. I saw suspicious behavior and I reported it. I was protecting a child." Officer Miller stepped forward, trying to insert himself between the two women. "Ma'am, I need you to calm down," he said, directing his words at Sarah. "We're just trying to get to the bottom of this." Sarah rose to her full height, her eyes blazing. "You want to get to the bottom of this, officer? Fine. I am Sarah Thorne. That girl is my daughter, Lily Thorne. And that man," she said, turning to point directly at David, her voice rising with every word, "the man you have cornered like an animal, the man you have accused of kidnapping, is my husband, David Thorne." The word husband landed with the force of a thunderclap in the quiet park. It hung in the air, rearranging the entire reality of the situation. Officer Miller's professional calm finally fractured, his eyes widening slightly as he looked from Sarah to David to a suddenly pale Carol. Her entire narrative, the foundation of this entire nightmare, had just been demolished with a single word. She began to stammer, "Well, I didn't know. How was I supposed to know?" It was in that moment of stunned silence that the fog of panic finally cleared from David's mind, replaced by a cold, steady clarity. The tripod, the camera, it had been running the whole time. "Officer," David said. His voice was different now. The fear was gone, replaced by a hard, steady confidence. He was no longer a victim begging to be believed. He was a man holding the truth in his hand. "Officer, you don't have to listen to her. You don't have to listen to me. You want to see what really happened here today? I can show you." He pointed to the small camera, still perched on its tripod near the fallen rocket. "We were filming the launch. It's a project for my daughter. It's all right there." Officer Riley, the younger cop, looked at Miller, who gave a hesitant nod. Riley walked over to the camera, David directing him on how to access the playback feature. He turned the small screen toward Miller, and the officers huddled around it. The bright afternoon sun made it hard to see, so they shielded the screen with their hands, their faces illuminated by the tiny glowing rectangle. First, the video showed the joy. It showed the triumphant flight of the stardust. It showed Lily jumping up and down, shrieking with delight. It showed David catching her in a huge celebratory hug, spinning her around as they both laughed. The audio was crystal clear. "We did it, Lily Pad. We actually did it." The girl on that screen was not scared. She was euphoric. She was with her dad. "That doesn't prove anything," Carol snapped, but her voice was thin, laced with a new thread of panic. "Keep watching," David said, his voice like ice. Riley scrolled back further to the clip from a few days prior. The park, the parachute test, and Carol. The officers watched the scene unfold. They saw Carol kneel down, saw her speak to Lily. They heard her poisonous, leading questions. They heard Lily tell her to go away. They heard David's quiet, firm warning. They saw the venomous look on Carol's face as she retreated. Officer Miller looked up from the screen, his gaze locking on Carol. "She's been harassing you?" he asked David. "For weeks," Sarah answered for him, "ever since we moved in." Then came the final piece of evidence. Riley played the footage from today. It showed the happy aftermath of the launch, the laughter, the song David was singing, and then it showed Carol marching across the grass toward them. The camera's wide angle captured the entire confrontation. It recorded her accusations, it recorded David's calm, patient explanations, but most importantly, after David and Lily turned their backs to her to pack up their rocket, the camera kept rolling. In the background of the shot, it clearly showed Carol walking away, a look of grim satisfaction on her face. It showed her pull out her phone. The microphone was sensitive enough to pick up the faint, tinny sound of her voice as she spoke to the 911 operator. "Yes, I need to report a child abduction in progress."
It was all there. A lie, conceived and executed in high definition. The silence that followed was absolute. Officer Miller slowly straightened up, his face a grim mask of disbelief and fury. He had been used. He had drawn his weapon, psychologically if not physically, on an innocent man. He had terrified a child. He had been a pawn in this woman's bitter, racist fantasy. Carol saw the look on his face, and her composure finally shattered. "That footage is fake. It's been edited. They are trying to trick you. He's a professional. He does things with computers. You cannot believe this." Her voice was a hysterical shriek. Her denial was so frantic, so transparent, it served only to confirm her guilt. Miller turned his back on her, his dismissal a brutal public statement. He looked at David, and for the first time he spoke to him not as a suspect, but as a citizen, as a man. "Mr. Thorne, I apologized for the situation." He then turned to his partner. "Riley," he said, his voice now crisp and authoritative, "take Mr. Thorne's family over to the shade, get them some water, make sure they are okay." He paused, then looked directly at a horrified Carol Peterson. "And get that woman's full name and address. Filing a false police report with malicious intent is a felony in this state." The transfer of power was total and complete. The focus of the law had pivoted 180 degrees. As Officer Riley began to question her, no longer as a heroic witness but as a criminal suspect, Carol stared at David. Her face, once a portrait of smug certainty, had collapsed into a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. The world she had worked so hard to control had just turned on her, and the man she had tried to destroy now stood as her accuser, the undeniable truth on his side.
The drive home was silent. The flashing lights of the police cars were gone, but David could still see them burned into the back of his eyelids. Sarah drove, one hand on the wheel, the other firmly holding his. In the back seat, Lily wasn't crying anymore. She was just quiet, her small hand having found David's and latched on with a strength that belied her size. The adrenaline from the confrontation had evaporated, leaving behind a heavy residue of exhaustion and a deep, aching sadness. It wasn't just the anger at Carol or the fear he'd felt. It was the sorrow that Lily's innocence had been shattered, that she had been forced to see the world as a place that could turn on her family with such viciousness for no reason at all. He felt the weight of her small fingers wrapped around his and knew that this moment, this awful, terrifying afternoon, had changed them forever. That evening, the three of them sat at the kitchen table, the half-finished rocket on the counter a monument to a day that had started with such promise. It was Lily who spoke first. "She can't be allowed to do that to other people," she said, her voice small but firm. "What if they didn't have a camera?" And in that simple, profound question, they found their purpose. Staying silent was not an option. It would be a betrayal of every family that did not have a camera, every person whose truth was disbelieved because they had no proof. David spent the next few hours in his office, not as a web designer, but as a storyteller. He took the raw footage from his camera and stitched it together. He added no dramatic music, no flashy graphics. He simply presented the truth in chronological order. He started with the joyful clip of him and Lily sanding the rocket in the garage. He showed their laughter, their teamwork, Then he inserted the clip from a few days ago of Carol's first intrusive questioning of Lily. He followed it with the triumphant launch of the Stardust, a moment of pure family joy. And then he showed the final, damning footage of Carol's confrontation, her lies, and her call to 911. He ended the video with the clear audio of his wife's voice arriving on the scene, her fierce love, the sound of truth itself. He titled the video "An Afternoon in Willow Creek Park" and posted it to the town's community Facebook page. The explosion was immediate and overwhelming. Within an hour, every single comment was an expression of support for their family and outrage toward Carol. Within 12 hours, it had been shared over 1,000 times, breaking out of their small community and into the wider state. By the end of the first day, the video had over 100,000 views. By the end of the week, it had surpassed 10 million. News vans began to appear on their quiet suburban street. The Willow Creek Neighborhood Association was forced to call an emergency town hall meeting. The school auditorium was filled to capacity, a standing room-only crowd of faces David had never seen before. One by one, after the video was played on a large projector screen to a silent, horrified room, other residents stood up. A Latino family shared a story of Carol threatening to call animal control on their dog for excessive barking. An elderly black woman who had lived in the neighborhood for 30 years recounted how Carol had once questioned if she was the help at her own daughter's barbecue. The stories painted a clear, undeniable picture of a woman who used her petty power as a weapon against anyone she deemed an outsider. The meeting ended with a formal vote to have her removed as president of the association. The final tally was 124 to 2. The legal consequences were even more severe. Spurred by the tidal wave of public outrage and the irrefutable video evidence, the district attorney's office formally charged Carol Peterson with filing a false police report and intentionally reporting a false emergency, a felony. Her picture was on the evening news, no longer the heroic citizen, but a woman facing serious jail time for a crime born of pure malice. In the year that followed, the Thorne family turned their trauma into a powerful force for good. The story had gone so viral that a stranger started a GoFundMe page for them, which raised an astonishing sum of money from people all over the world who were moved by their story. They took that money, over $250,000, and used it as the seed capital to launch the Unity Park Project, a nonprofit foundation dedicated to funding and advocating for safe, inclusive public recreational spaces in underserved communities. The Willow Creek Police Department, facing a public relations nightmare, brought in experts to completely overhaul their training protocols. A mandatory 80-hour implicit bias and de-escalation training program was implemented for all 300 officers on the force. The Thorne family's video became a central part of that training, a real-world example of how quickly prejudice can escalate into a dangerous, life-threatening situation. David, Sarah, and Lily were invited to share their story on a national morning news program, reaching an audience of over 5 million people. Lily, once shy, spoke with a quiet confidence that captivated everyone. She talked about her love of science, her love for her family, and her belief that people were mostly good, even if some of them got lost in fear. And finally, 2 months before the one-year anniversary of that horrible day, a letter arrived. Lily had, on an impulse, submitted her film, The Lily Rocket Project, to the state's Youth Film Festival. She had added a final chapter to the documentary using the footage from the park. The letter informed her that she had won the festival's grand prize for social impact. The story that began as a simple bonding exercise between a stepfather and his new daughter had become an award-winning film. It was no longer a memory of trauma. It was a testament to their family's resilience, a story of how they took the ugliest parts of the world and used them to launch something beautiful into the sky. This story is about more than just a single afternoon in a single park. It's a reminder that prejudice is a choice, but so is courage. It's about how the truth, when captured and shared, can be the most powerful weapon against injustice. Family is not defined by what it looks like from the outside, but by the fierce, unwavering love that holds it together on the inside. If this story moved you, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel for more true stories that matter. And in the comments below, we want to hear from you. Share a time you witnessed someone stand up to injustice. Let's create a community that proves that truth and love will always be stronger than fear and hate.